Hello, my name is Gregory Osborne, video game audio composer and implementer, and today we're going to talk about an important part of making an interactive audio-visual system, that being using events to help tie your audio and visual interactions together. I'm going to use an analogy that describes a concert. Let's say you're the stage manager and you want to sync up your lighting people, pyrotechnics people, and your stage crew to all perform different actions at a single cue from the music. One way you could do this would be to keep a list written down of every group that you need to contact, and on the cue you would individually call all of them on the radio to let them know which set of instructions to follow. This would be if your event manager script did its logic, and then when it judged a queue needed to be called, you had typed out the proper classes and which functions from those classes you needed to call. The issue with this is that if you want to add another class that gets affected by this queue, not only do you have to write that script, but you also have to go back to your event manager script and type in which method needs to be called in the right place, meaning you have to make changes in two places. On the other hand, what you can do as a concert manager is simply shout "Code Blue" into your radio, and everybody who is listening for codes will understand what's expected of them because they have code blue tied to specific actions they want to take in their own instructions. In scripting, this means that all the event manager has to do is invoke an event, and any new class you need to add that is also going to be affected by that event can just listen for that event from inside the class and determine within the class what to do from there. Let's start in a new Unity project. My first goal is going to be to set up a cube that moves up a little bit on an event. First, I'm going to create an event controller script. This is going to be the script from which we call all the events. In this script, I'm going to declare an event that can be listened to by any method that returns a void by typing in public static event system.action gpress. Gpress being the name of the event that will be called because I want to call it when I press G on my keyboard. Next, I'm going to go into the update method and listen for when I press G, calling the event when I do by typing the name of the event gpress.invoke with parentheses. I'm also going to throw a debug.log here just so I know the event is being called properly. Save this and go back to Unity. You'll notice that when I run the scene and press G, I get an error. That's because the way events work is they keep a list of all the methods that are subscribed to that event and then call them on invoke. But if there's nothing listening, there's nothing to call, and the event is defined as null, throwing a null reference exception. In order to avoid this, go back to your event call and put a question mark after the name of your event. This checks if gpress has any subscribed functions before trying to call it. This can be useful if the classes subscribed to that event have to spawn in or get deleted eventually, and it covers you in case there's nothing to call for that event. Now when we go back to Unity and press G, we get to our debug message without errors. The next step is going to be setting up a class to listen to this event and perform an action. I'll create a cube, then create a new script I'll call cube1listener. In this script, I'll make a new method called moveUp, which we're going to have trigger on the gpress event. I'll just have the cube add a constant to its position y value by finding the cube's transform and then updating the y value in its position vector. In order to have the event controller add our moveUp method to the list of method it calls on the gpress event, we're going to type in the start function eventcontroller.gpress, then plus equals, and the name of our function moveUp without any parentheses or past values. Lastly, I'm going to make sure that if for any reason this cube is destroyed, it removes itself from the list so that when the event is invoked, we don't get any errors from trying to call a method from a destroyed object. Let's go back into Unity to see our cube fly up off the screen when we press G. Look at it go! That's not all events can do. Let's say we want this event to pass values to all of the subscribed methods, like a float. I'm going to create a new event called hpress in our event controller script by copy and pasting our previous event declaration and replacing G with an H, as well as doing the same thing in our update function. However, if we want to pass a float to all the subscribed functions, after action we're going to put in angle brackets, and inside of them we'll put the type we want to be able to pass. Once we do this, you'll notice we cannot invoke the hpress event without passing a float value. Let's create a public float to pass so that we can play around with the value in the Unity editor. I'll call it passed_float and then put it into the parentheses after invoke. Now it's all happy. We can go back to our cube1listener and create a moveDown method. Since we want it to be listening for a float, we're going to make sure this method takes a float, and we'll call it passed_moveDownFloat. We'll copy and paste the line from the moveUp method and instead replace the plus 0.3f with a minus past moved down float. I'll add a debug log to make sure it's working. And we can't forget to subscribe the moveDown function to the hpress event. Remember, you don't need to add the parentheses, just the name of the method. Save and go back to Unity to check if it works. Notice you can change the value and the cube will respond to that past value. Let's show off the advantage of using this event system a little more by creating a new cube2 that has its own script on it called cube2listener. I'll move this cube over so we can see it separate from cube1. I'm going to try and take the float from the hpress event and instead use it to change the color of the cube. Let's go into the script, declare a material matte, and in the start function, we're going to get the material by using getComponentRenderer.material. Next, we'll create a change color method that accepts the past float we'll call pastColorChangeFloat. And then we'll type in a line that will reduce the blue of our material every time we press H. If all goes correctly, we should get a yellow cube at the very end. Lastly, we'll make sure that we subscribe the change color method to the event in the start function, and also, again, add our onDestroy unsubscription. Back in Unity, we'll change our past float to something like 0.05 because the material's color value is measured from between 0 and 1. When we run it and spam the H button, you'll see our two cubes taking the same float input and using it for two different purposes. In fact, you technically don't even have to use the float for any of the logic inside the method. As long as your method can receive the float, it can be used as a basic event call. Don't forget, you can send pretty much any type through an event, including enums that you've defined yourself. This can be incredibly useful if you want to be able to define different actions on events such as animation choreography depending on where in the form of your music you are, or different color schemes, or even trigger both your music and your visuals at the same time based on player input. And it's way easier to keep track if you want to add a ton of different objects to your scene that react to the same cues just in different ways. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the best of luck implementing event systems into your own projects.